Evening class. It's already 5 p.m. Just to confirm you can hear me. If you can hear me, let me just see by show of a character or something. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. As our usual custom is, we give 5 minutes for us to reach out to our classmates and our party members to join into class. We start at 5:05 on the dot. At 5:05 on the dot. Our facilitator for today is already in class. So reach out to your party members to join in as we're going to start on time, 5:05 on the dot. Thank you. Good evening, class. It's already time to start. It's 5:05. We've given the 5 minutes for other class members to join. We're going to start right away. If you're just joining us, remember to sign in with your name and your party for attendance. Today, we're going to be talking about the Nigerian Constitution and citizens' rights. And we have none other than our Deputy Director for Lagos State, XII017. Uchechi is a legal practitioner with a key focus on technology law and regulatory compliance. She serves as a legal consultant to the foremost intercountry adoption agency in Nigeria, Life Foundation, BBC News Nigeria, and the Electoral College. She is the head legal consultant of Zoe Legal, a corporate, commercial, and startup legal advisory firm in Lagos State. She has worked with several local and international bodies on fintech, telecommunications, employment law, and immigration. In addition to her legal practice, she is very keen on public advocacy and the education of Nigerian youths on politics and governance. She serves in the Electoral College as the Deputy Director of Lagos State. Uchechi is called to the Nigerian Bar and has obtained an LLM in International Commercial Law from the University of Hertfordshire. She runs a podcast called Zoe Legal, where she speaks on legal issues and is keen on using her platform to encourage awareness and education amongst the masses. Let's welcome our facilitator for the day, Madam Uchechi. Over to you now. Thank you.
Hi, Silas. Thank you so much for that introduction. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. It's always a great time to be back at the Electoral College, and well done to every single one of you. I'm always watching, I see what you're doing, and there's been so much, growth and improvement with how the college is being run. I remember when I was also a student as well, and looking back, I can see that a lot of, changes have been achieved. So it's also great to see that there's so much turnout today. I just wanted to ask a couple of people here, what is one thing that you'd say was a misconception before now, and what has been your takeaway? What has been a correct notion that you have taken away? One or two people can answer. One misconception you had, or just one thing that you have learned so far throughout the college session that you've had. Anyone can answer.
So if you want to answer, just put up your hand so I can unmute you to unmute yourself. Okay, Gideon, I see you. I'm going to ask you to unmute. I've asked you to unmute. You can unmute and answer the question.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Gideon.
You can hear me loud and clear. One thing that I've learned so far is not to be emotional about politics.
Not to be emotional.
Learn this, but being in this college, that's one thing that I've taken so far. And I'm trying to improve on that. And the only thing that will make me feel from the emotions I've had over time is for me to study and understand how things are done. Because I think most of us are oblivious of the fact that politics has a lot of technicalities.
Gideon, I can't hear you very well. I don't know if it's just me. I'm really struggling to hear you.
Gideon, can you speak a little louder? I can hear you, but our facilitator is struggling to hear you.
Is it better now?
Yeah, yes, it's much better now.
All right. So I said, I have...
Uh-oh.
I think we lost Gideon.
Learn to be emotional. Much.
Okay.
Okay, I think one thing I picked out from what Gideon said is that he has learned not to be emotional.
To be emotional, yes,
about
you're right.
politics. And I think
Yes,
that's a very important key lesson to take away. Someone said in the comments, I learned our constitution works. Very true. We only didn't harness the power it wields. I absolutely agree with you. So I would say, in short, I think you guys are doing very well. I mean, these few things that you've learned shows that you're definitely paying attention. And I trust and believe that this is going to cause a ripple effect in the larger scheme of things. And I will just encourage everyone to, continue learning, continue garnering education. That's the first step to making a change, to getting informed, getting the right knowledge, and then applying it to yourself. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the Nigerian Constitution and citizens' rights as it pertains to our political and civic responsibilities. As Silas had said earlier, I am a lawyer. I was called to bar in 2013. And obviously, during the course of my education, I came across the Nigerian Constitution, and in it had a lot of jewels, like someone has mentioned, right? So a lot of times you find that we are criticized a lot as a nation. Our laws are criticized a lot. But if we even had any glimmer of exactly what this law said, if we even took the steps to fulfill the letters of these laws, I think would be ways ahead than we are right now, right? So a few things I would like for everyone here to take away at the end of this class is one, to understand the general overview of rights, right? To gain an understanding into what rights are as an individual and as a citizen of Nigeria, right? I'd also like us to gain an understanding about the legal framework of citizens' rights in Nigeria. When I talk about the legal framework, I'm referring to the structures that enable the rights of a citizen in Nigeria. I'd also like us to have an understanding of the civic and political rights that we have as citizens of Nigeria, right? Not as citizens of Australia or Canada, but the mere fact that you are in Nigeria means that there are civic and political rights that you have solely, right? We'll also delve into the Nigerian Constitution briefly to point out some of the specific rights that pertains to our civic and political system and, lifeline here in Nigeria. And then lastly, we'll delve a little bit into the Electoral Act and the regulations of INEC as it pertains to our electoral responsibilities. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to ask the class is about rights. Can anyone please assist in defining what rights are? Just off the top of your head. When you hear the word rights, what comes to mind? What do you understand to mean right? I like it to be a little bit interactive, even though it is a knowledge transfer session. But I'd like us to engage a little bit. Anyone at all, you could also drop it on the chat. What do you understand by the word rights? Okay, someone said legal entitlement. Okay, Gideon said a self-claimed privilege that you feel entitled to. Okay, Tolu said privileges. Rights are my entitlement. Okay, so there's an understanding that rights are the things that you're, or something that you're entitled to, right? Yes, you are correct. Rights definitely can be defined as having an entitlement to have or to do something, right? Rights can also be sometimes said together or is interchanged with obligations, right? it is what a person, okay, so I would say this, your right stops where another person's right starts, right? You can have rights to basic things in the society, like basic provisions and services. You can have rights just for the mere fact that you are existing in a society. And once you leave that society, that right ceases to exist, right? So I would define rights in an official term as legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlement, right? They are fundamental normative rules about what is allowed of people or owed to people according to some legal system, social convention, or ethical theory. So it's a lot more than an entitlement, right? It connotes a sense of freedom to do. It connotes a sense of fundamental principles that is allowed you, but for the mere fact that you exist in a particular society. Our legal system allows for a certain element of freedom and participation. In another legal system, case in point, in North Korea, right, a majority of the rights that we enjoy as citizens of Nigeria, you will not even smell it, right? So some rights are very subjective to the legal system that you're dealing with, right? So I said once that your right stops where another person's right starts. So for instance, the right to freedom, we all have rights to freedom, right? But you're not supposed to trespass into another person's property. You're not supposed to walk naked on the streets because that would be disturbing the social or societal peace, right? You're not supposed to drive on a one-way street because then you would be purposefully causing harm to another person. So there are different sort of barricades or limits to how much you can express or partake of your rights in a society. All right, so moving swiftly on, let's look at the rule of law. What do we understand by the rule of law in the context of a democratic society? Any takers? Well, it's already been displayed on the screen, but I'd just like you to, in your own terms, and in the course of what you've learned, what do you understand by the rule of law? If you've ever heard about the term rule of law, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Yeah, supremacy of the Constitution. Okay.
Okay. I have a hand up.
Okay.
Can I unmute him to answer?
Yes, please.
I've asked Obe Collins to unmute.
Rule of law. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, rule of law is a state of watertight separation of power and strict adherence to the constitution of the country.
Okay, strict adherence to the constitution of the country. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of the term, no one is above the law. No one is above the law. That's also some of the phrases that is associated with the concept of rule of law. Now, there is no rule of law within societies if human rights are not protected. Rule of law is actually the vehicle that ensures that our rights as human beings are protected. If a society does not have a strong structure or a strong adherence to the rule of law, our human rights turn into a principle rather than a reality. It turns into a utopian idea or a mirage rather than an actuality. So rule of law is actually very, very important because it's the vehicle that protects the democratic system and the rights of the common man, right? It provides a structure through which the exercise of power is subjected to and is also checked, right? So there are different principles in the rule of law that helps or that are vehicles that help to protect, the liberty of the people. Like someone mentioned, the supremacy of the Constitution, which is very, very important, that every other law, every other regulation is subject to the Constitution. And if at any time there's any inconsistency, that law or regulation is voidable or void to the extent of its inconsistency with the Constitution. And there are various principles that also uphold the rule of law. For instance, I stated here the idea that we are all equal before the law. The independence and autonomy of the judiciary is very, very important. I know that a lot of people will argue that does not seem to be the case in our society here, but these are the very things that you can point out and say that the rule of law in this society is very shaky. Hence, you would start seeing symptoms such as abuse of court processes, abuse of electoral proceedings, because the rule of law in itself is not being upheld, right? There's the superiority of the law, separation of powers. If you notice, the executive arm, the legislative arm, and the judiciary arm are separate. That is for a reason. Powers do not reside with one person, and that is for a reason, so that there can be appropriate checks and balances. The legislative arm can, in fact, enact the law, but they are not the ones to enforce it, right? And they're also not the ones to adjudicate on it. So that's why there has to be proper separation of power, right? It also has to be, the law has to be known and predictable. That means if you're doing one thing for one person, right, it should also be done to another person. You don't now start twisting the rule because maybe this person has more favors or nepotism or any sort of thing. It should be clear, it should be known, it should be predictable. That's why we have precedents in legal parlance, because one can easily go and say, okay, if the same factors exist in a particular case, it would apply to another case, right? We also have principles such as right to participation. And in fact, right to participation is very, very important, and it goes to the roots of our electoral obligation and rights as citizens, right? The right to participation is actually what fuels democracy. If you have a democracy without participation, then it has already crumbled from inception. If there's no citizen participation in a democratic system, that system is already standing on shaky waters, because it is the participation of the citizens that gives it breath, gives it life, that it is indeed a democratic system. So yes, I just wanted us to touch briefly on the rule of law, because I know that when we get to start talking about rights, people can say, oh, this right is there, but how come this happens, this happens? This is actually the vehicle that carries the rights and ensures that everything is done in an appropriate manner. If this rule of law is shaky in a society, then the rights of the citizens are at risk. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to the legal framework of the rights of the Nigerian citizen. And like we've mentioned, the Constitution, it is, when I was in school, we used to call it the grand norm, the mother of all laws, the creme de la creme, right? The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that is where all other laws, all other regulations derive their authority from, derive their legitimacy from. And because we are restricting our knowledge sharing to our political and civic rights, I'll touch on the Electoral Act as well, and also INEC's regulation and guidelines for the conduct of elections. We also have international human rights obligations, right? There's some rights that are widely received or widely imbibed into different systems because they've been agreed upon as basic citizen rights, right? We're going to have a brief look at some of them. And we also have regional human rights obligations, perhaps some African Charter some of the organizations or some of the bodies that Nigerians have participated in and have also ratified into our constitution. So the next slide, you look at the next slide, there's some human rights instruments that we have either ratified or are yet to ratify. We have the International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights that we have ratified. We have Convention on the Rights of the Child. We have ratified that as well. But because the child's right is a state exclusive jurisdiction within our constitution. And remember, I said that our constitution is the ground norm. So because the laws that deal with the child is state exclusive, is not a federal, it's not under the federal, what's the word? It's not a federal adjudicating principle, or however I would put it. So each state has to, in fact, ratify it into its laws before it becomes practicable in that state. So if you notice, a lot of southern states, Lagos, for instance, have ratified the Child's Right Act, but northern states have not yet fully ratified it. There are some states in the north that have not ratified the Child's Right Act because some of the principles in that law contravenes maybe some religious practices and some things like that. So you find that, there's that disparity. But a lot of organizations have also risen up to speak against it and all of that. But yeah, like I said, it has to be ratified into our constitution or our laws before it becomes justiciable, or before we can act on it. So I just listed a couple of them. Actually, one of them also is the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. We have optional protocol for the Convention Against Torture, other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. We have International Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. So you may also be wondering, okay, there's also Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. You may also be wondering, right, how does that intertwine with our political rights? Because sometimes some of these things are quite important to know, because when you're speaking about it and you're talking about how women cannot, someone is telling you women cannot run for government position, women cannot contest, or because someone is, I don't know, someone is probably half caste or something, they cannot run for office. You tell them that, what, our laws allow for that. When you're making your arguments, you make it with factual basis, not like the first speaker said, not on an emotional ground, right? That as long as it is contained in your law, and we have even ratified an international convention on eliminating any form of discrimination against women, why would we not participate? If you have fulfilled all the requirements, on what basis, on what grounds do you have to speak against or to come against someone who has fully fulfilled all the requirements for that law? So these are just a few talking points that you can bring up as well. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to civil and political rights. So a brief definition on that. Civil and political rights are a class of rights that protect individuals' freedom from infringement by government, people, social organizations, private individuals, and it ensures that you have the ability to participate in the civil and political life of a society and a state without any form of discrimination or repression. I said earlier that just by the mere fact that you are a Nigerian citizen, there are rights that accrue to you just because you're a Nigerian, and some of those rights are civil and political in nature. Your right to vote is a right that you should protect and you should utilize with all of you, because that is an exclusive right to you. An American can only be an observer, right? a Briton can only be an observer in our elections, because till tomorrow, they will never be able to participate, because our laws does not allow for their participation. You, as a citizen of Nigeria, you have the right to participate in an election and a right to vote as well. These are some very exclusive rights just for the mere fact of being Nigerian that sometimes we actually look down on, or perhaps because of our experiences, we shy away. There's so much voter apathy, which is really, really unfortunate. But the truth is that's your right, and you just have to keep showing up. You have to keep arming yourself with the right knowledge, and you have to keep showing up, right? Because that's a right that you have. You sometimes it comes with a lot of intimidation. I mean, we see what happened in the last election. There was a lot of intimidation, a lot of sort of suppression that was going on. But it is your right. It is your right that you have fully to participate in an election, right? Civil rights include ensuring that people's physical and mental integrity, their life and safety, and their protection from discrimination on all grounds, right? For instance, by race or by gender, perhaps you're from a particular location. I mean, these things, we saw it play out in the flesh and blood here in Lagos, right? That perhaps because you are from a particular ethnic society, some people were being bullied and being told that they could not participate. But these are absolutely against what our laws stand for. These are absolutely against, the tenets of our constitution, right? You have the freedom and the right to vote without any sort of infringement whatsoever. You have the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom to gather as well. So just to enumerate some of those rights, there's the right to vote in an election, a right to join a political party. You have a right to run for office as long as you are of age and you're able to fulfill all of those requirements that are stated in the Electoral Act and in the INEC guidelines as well. You also have a right to participate freely, and I will add peacefully, in political rallies, events, or protests, right? A lot of times people always ask, how can we participate? How can we be, more involved, more engaged in the political life or in Nigeria? There's so much that you can do, aside even actually voting, which is very, very important and should not be underemphasized, right? Voting and even participating in running for elections. There are other ways you can be that educating factor, that informates, the one with the information, the one that can say, you know what, you're being harassed. Okay, well, why do you think I'm being harassed? Because this is a public environment and I am well within my rights to organize a protest here. And of course, all of these things, you do it with a level of wisdom, right? If you see it getting heated, perhaps the best thing to do in that particular time would be to sort of disperse just to maintain the peace. But then again, you go and dialogue in a very peaceable and understanding manner and bring in factual, laws and, speak in a way that shows that, this person knows what he is doing. A lot of people do it. You could also use your platforms. Some of you have thousands and thousands of followers, use your platforms to be sort of like an educative voice out there, just to educate people on their responsibilities as citizens of Nigeria, and also their power in being, in participating in the political crimes of the country, right? Because the truth is that there's a way that you can translate some of these laws, some of these obligations and rights that another person may not be able to translate it. But you have that power, you have that voice, and you have that audience. So there's always something you can do. Okay. So the next thing would be, okay, so I had just defined what civil rights were, and that includes ensuring that people's physical and mental integrity, life and safety is protected from discrimination on grounds such as race, gender, national origin, color, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, or disability, and individuals' rights such as privacy and the freedom of thought and conscience, speech and expression. All of those are protected. Political rights are also quite intertwined with natural justice, right? So the procedures for fairness in court, the fact that you are innocent until proven guilty. A lot of people do not understand that concept. That's why sometimes when people are dragging themselves on social media, you're just like, okay. But at the end of the day, it is still the court of law that can, properly adjudicate someone guilty. No matter how much glaring the evidence is, you are, in the eyes of the law, especially in a criminal matter, you are seen as innocent until proven guilty. And we all have the right to a fair trial, right? And due process must be followed. You also have the right to seek redress or legal remedy. I know that sometimes seeking legal redress can be quite expensive in this part. But another thing is that there are other legal channels that you can seek remedy that is not necessarily litigation. You can use mediation. A lot of people are not concerned with mediation. Mediation is actually quite an easier path, more informal, and I believe cheaper as well. And also, whatever you agree during mediation, you can take it to the court and they will sign and use that as the judgment for that case. So these are some of the things that you can actually, look into that are ways of seeking redress, especially when it's on infringement of your legal right. And I think that a lot of Nigerians are becoming more aware, because I see a lot of people settling out of court a lot recently. There's a ruckus about a case, and then after a while, they say the parties have settled. They settled out of court. I'm like, okay, so please, you can see that there are other ways to seek redress. That's not necessarily litigation that takes a longer time, right? There's a right of participation in civil society and politics, such as freedom of association, the right to assemble, the right to petition, the right of self-defense, and the right to vote. So we've already talked about each of these things. All right, so we'll move on to the Constitution. But first of all, I'd just like to throw some of these questions to the class before we delve into each of these civil and political rights that we have generally in the Constitution. Would you say that human rights is respected in Nigeria? And I want your answer to not be emotional. Think about it critically with all that you know and all that you have come to learn about our system, our structure, and how things are done. Would you say that the human rights in Nigeria are respected? Anyone can answer.
I've asked Atiba to unmute and answer.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening. No, due to my experience, even at the station, even at the court of law, enforcement of human rights are not being enforced in Nigeria today. Because take for instance, right to freedom of association, and at the protest ground, a police officer will be telling you when you are even citing that section 40 of the Constitution, give the citizens the right to assemble and hear his opinion. He will still be telling you that, yes, we know that this is your constitutional right, and at the same time, we still have the right to arrest you. And they will still arrest you. It happens to colleagues of mine, peaceful protesters holding placards on on Unilag too short height. While we address the police, even the officers in uniform, you're like, yes, this thing is genuine. But when one of the other came, he just gave the order they should disperse us with tear gas, start shooting rubber bullets. And our people got arrested. After whiling away the time, we get the lawyer, we later go back to the main your university entrance and engage the DCP. From there, it was like, Solomon, you should know the usual tactics now, that this is the usual chaos that does it mean as a citizen of this country, we don't have the right to even express ourselves when we are not, when the situation is not suitable to us? So if we are not saying on these things, there have been several occasions whereby DCP, we've engaged ourselves on fundamental human rights of citizens while at the barricade. Even it got to some point that they will tell us that before you protest, you need to write a letter. Until when we fought that for the fact that the previous commissioner of police at Lagos, I think that's Mr. Fatai Owoseni of a person who said before the protest can hold at Lagos, there's need for permission, in which it is not stated in any of the constitution that if you want to protest, you need to write the police that, oh, I want to protest, so this is the letter. This, I don't know, me, I've not seen any of the constitution where it is stated that the citizen know, before you protest, before you carry out the protest, you need to write the police before you embark on the protest. But they do hide under the illusion that it is going to be hijacked by hoodlums, in which we are the hoodlums. They were, since I've been coming to the States with other persons, no hoodlums have ever hijacked protests in my own presence. The only hoodlums I know is, don't let me say that because they are recorded, is uniform personnel. When we start telling you that, no, you don't have to do it this way, this is how you should do it, and we do ask this question. If you are telling us you don't have to do it this way, how can you beat a child and still determine how the child will cry? Is it possible? It's not possible. So in Nigeria, enforcement of fundamental human rights is something of a tug of war. Even a lawyer, I remember the case of Inebe, Barrister Inebe, Effiong, that was locked up in Akwa Ibom prison for a month. What is his crime? Even just to tell the justice that she needs to excuse herself from the case because the parties in the matter, she attended the wedding of the person, the accused in the case, that they saw the judge, and now for him to even just utter the statement that he is not feeling comfortable in the court of law, that armed officers, they enter the court of law, it is a crime for him. He was subject to a month's imprisonment, and today nothing was done. The body of benchers, they raised alarm all left and right. He spent that 1 month in the prison. That is a lawyer who even understands, who can interpret the Constitution very well. That is what happens to him. And I have never seen in the Constitution where it is stated that if the proceedings of the court is going on, that the police officers have the right to enter the courtroom with arms. The only situation I know is when there is maybe there will be judgment, pronouncement of judgment. That is when the police can barricade the entrance and nobody should move in and out. Not that they will enter the court premises. We've seen a situation in this country whereby the case between Omoyele Sowore and DSS, whereby the DSS entered the courtroom to abduct him. The judge himself has to abscond, pass through the back of the court to escape. We've seen the case of Emefiele, that he was kept in detention.
I think you should round up so she can go on with the class. Thank you.
Thank you. You've seen the case of Emefiele. We've seen the case of Bawa, our EFCC chairman. They've infringed on his fundamental human rights. Nothing till today. So I think in Nigeria, we don't have that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Atiba. I think you probably spoke in the mind of perhaps everyone on the call. But the thing is this, right? And I always like to say this because a lot of times when we try to talk about the situation of Nigeria, we always express ourselves with so much shock, like, this happened, right? And these same things have been happening right from, I don't know, even while we're under the colonial rule. It's been our reality for a very, very, very long time. And it's almost as if the system has remained the same while the people have also sort of tolerated it and have received it and have lived with it. So like, I mean, you started a couple of, I'm sure if I leave the floor running, there'll be lots and lots of examples. I mean, the current election, left a lot to be desired, right? And I always say this, you're given a chance to speak, and there's still that level of, emotion, is not working, right? I mean, we can all agree that there is a lot left to be desired with our practice of law and rule of law and respect of human rights, whether the framework is even understood. There's a lot to be desired. But then what can be done? What is the change that can be done? Because let's not forget that some of these legal systems or governmental systems that we look up to, they are years and years and years ahead of us, right? They did not start where they are now, right? They came through a lot of hurdles. So we are very passionate about speaking about what is wrong. What is wrong has been wrong. What is wrong we were born to see the wrong things, and it's just been increasingly wrong. But we as citizens, we have accepted it. Sometimes we even make jokes about it. We start, something happens and we start cracking jokes. There's memes, there's a song, there's a saying, and we carry on as usual, and we call ourselves resilient, and life goes on. And if we're given the mic, Nigeria is this, it's like a cycle, and we're always shocked when we talk about, like, oh my God, look at what happened. And I also say this as well, it can be worse. It can be worse. There are some systems that you can't even speak a word about against any. I mean, we see it happen on social media when we learn about some other countries. You can't even speak a word against ruling powers. There are still systems that are still subject to a level of colonial rule, right? Some of the French colonies in Africa, they're still very, very much subject to their colonial masters. They still repatriate taxes. So there's always a worse system of government that you still look back at your system and like, well, I mean, we're not there yet, but at least we have the skeletal system that if we all agree to do the work, if we all agree to not be led so much by emotions and nepotism and biases that do not really make sense, and tribalism, if we really make the main thing, perhaps we can make progress. Because the truth is that we all know that there's a problem somewhere, right? You mentioned something about the police asking for a letter to protest. Don't forget that I told you that where your rights starts and ends is where another person's rights also, begins, right? And then you now have an obligation, right? If the police is asking you, is saying you need to write a letter, right? Personally, would you rather focus on the fact that you feel your rights are being trampled on, or you want to focus on what is the goal of that protest? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to, share your knowledge of rights with the police, or you want to achieve a protest so that you can bring about awareness? The police on their own, fine. They have their own score, but don't forget that they also have a duty, be it that sometimes they get, into their heads and they want to do what they want to do. They also have a duty to protect the lives and security of a place. So if something as simple as a letter is required, I don't know that it is such a big deal to say, okay, is this what they want? Fine, let us give it to them. Rather than now majoring in, oh my God, how dare you ask me for a letter? It's against the Constitution. But if you also look at the police laws as well, you would see that they also have some kind of obligation to fulfill, which may not, in essence, right? You may not feel that you are allowed to, like I told you as well, your rights are not all-encompassing. There are barricades to it. There are measures, there are checks and balances to it. You can say, oh, I have a right to freedom, but you cannot be walking outside at night when there's a curfew or a state of emergency, right? It might be that in that area, there was something going on and they're like, okay, in this area, before you do anything, please let us know so that we can sign it off and ensure that people are, I'm saying in an ideal way, in an ideal society, I know the state of the police system. You don't need to tell me, I know. But I'm saying that sometimes it's important to keep the main thing. And each of these minor offenses, if it's an hurdle that you can scale it and move on and keep the main thing. That's what I would respond to that. Fine, we have years to go, but then what can we do? What steps can we take? This is a good step. Getting knowledge, getting educated, is a good step. Sometimes being less emotional and more strategic, more forward-thinking, more goal-oriented can be the key thing that we need. Right now, after elections, things have died down. You don't really see people talking about anything. But the truth is that you also have a duty as an opposition to keep the ruling party on their toes. Your work doesn't end. It's not just about, okay, the election was had and done. You still have a duty as an opposition to keep the ruling party on their toes. You still should speak up. You still should be more engaged. You still should let your voices be heard. This thing you said you were going to do, this timeline you give, well, what have you done about it? I'm really just saying, right? Because I as much as possible, I try to be more remedial in my focus. Because like I said, if we were to give everybody the leeway to speak, we all have our examples, but you are still a Nigerian for a reason. We are still all here, So the faster we get to the remedy part of things and the solution part of things and the what can we do part of things, the better for us. Because for a long time, we have been in this cycle of, let's get a new president so that the president will do better. And then the president comes and then it's like, but hopefully we still have hope. But then what can we do as citizens, right? I understand human rights may or may not be respected in levels, in certain degrees, right? But I will tell you that in Nigeria, we still have a form of respect of human rights compared to other systems. It can really be bad. It can really be North Korea type of bad, but we're not there. So how can we safeguard, benchmark it and grow from there? That's always where we're at. And I think that's what the electoral college is about, right? That's why we do this year in, year out. There's no time we'll say, okay, we have gone to hell, let's all go home, right? We always need to keep at it, right? And then we can say that we did our very best. Okay, so different questions that we should just have in mind when we are going through the Nigerian Constitution. Just carry it in your heart in whatever capacity that you deal with. And also think about say, for instance, you're running a political office, right? Some of these things you need to carry in your mind, you need to have at the back of your mind as well. Does the justice system have the will to treat the issues of human rights without fear or favor? Does the country have institutional framework to tackle and grapple with human rights abuses? And does the Nigerian government know what human rights and tenets of democracy are, right? So if you are on both sides of the fence, there is a responsibility and there's a right for you. If you're the one who is in office, right, do you even know what the human rights are? Do you even understand the institutional framework? How can it be better? How can we better tackle and grapple with the human rights abuses of Nigeria? And if you're seated on the other side, when you're electing your officers, when you're voting for your officers, ask them these questions to know, this person that you're voting for, you're running for, does this person even understand what it means to have human rights, right? Does this person understand the separation of power, that the judiciary should be autonomous? Does this person even understand the tenets of democracy? So on either side of the fence, there is a right and there's an obligation on. So these are things that we should always ask ourselves. Okay, so some of the rights that pertain to our civic and political duties in Nigeria, the right to freedom of thoughts, conscience, and religion. Yes, Section 38 of the Constitution gives us that right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. That means that you are free to have any sort of political ideology that you have, as long as it is not criminal in nature. Obviously, it is not threatening the security of the state, and it does not go against any sort of humanity or human rights that we have as a nation. You have the freedom, to harbor any sort of political ideology that you may have. You have the right, the freedom of conscience and religion as well. We also have the right to freedom of expression and the press, So obviously, like I said, these rights, they are not all encompassing. They have certain barricades, they have certain limits as well. You cannot be speaking against you cannot be threatening, what's that word? The tyranny, or like trying to overthrow an elected president. That obviously is threatening the security of the state. But I mean, you have the right to call for action on things that you know that are due to you. You have the right to express, to criticize the government, because it is a democratic government. You have the right to bring to light maybe some form of atrocity or some form of infringement that you may have come across. There's a right to freedom of expression. You can use your social media, to organize, trainings, education, speak on these things, right? Right to peaceful assembly and association, right? Right to peaceful assembly and association. Like I said earlier as well, even if they say you have a right to peaceful assembly and association, you also have a duty on you to find out what it takes to carry out a peaceful protest or assembly or association in a particular area. And I think that this even goes beyond just knowing your rights. It also borders on wisdom as well. Because like I said earlier, it is important to keep the main thing the main thing. What is the goal? What are we trying to achieve here? We're trying to pass across information. We're trying to raise awareness. We're trying to create buzz, right? If the security, whatever of that estate says you should get something signed off. I mean, even within your estate where you live, I'm sure there are like rules and regulations. I mean, someone cannot just drive in some estates in Lekki. In fact, you think you're going to see the Queen. You stop at the gate, you have to call, they have to give you number, they have to give you code, before you can even go inside. You will do that because your aim is to go and see that person and go home. If not, you will fight with the gateman, and that will waste your day, and then it becomes something that it shouldn't be, right? Okay, that's what you need me to do to have access? I will do that, right? As long as we both agree that I can have this peaceful assembly, then that's that. But it's important as well to be educated and be aware of the surrounding and what it takes. Because sometimes, I mean, the time I was unfortunately accosted, a long time ago when I was accosted by the police, right? I didn't know there was a curfew in that region at that time. And, by 6 o'clock, I saw policemen coming to come and pack people. And, we're like, oh, my rights, I have a right to be here. And they're like, they announced a curfew, well, it is your duty, ignorance of the law is no excuse. It is your duty to be aware of what it takes to perform your rights and to have your freedom in an area. So there's that. I know that these things are not without abuse or whatever, but as much as possible, let's do the best that we can to achieve the purpose that we've sought out to do. Right to freedom of movement. I believe that's also very, very self-explanatory. Atiba has also spoken about that briefly as well. You have a right to move around freely from one part of the country to another. You have a right to move around, especially in public places, obviously not in private settlements. That would, at least you would need some sort of permits to do that. So yes, that's one of your rights as well. Right to freedom from discrimination. And this can take many forms. It could be by virtue of your age. As long as you're above 18, you should not be looked down on, or you should not be discriminated against because of perhaps you're younger than the rest of the people, right? It could also be based on your, it could be based on your religion as well. You know, you should not be discriminated upon based on your choice of religion. You know, you're free to participate in any civic or political affair in the country. Also, it could be based on your tribe as well. I mean, that goes without saying. We all have the right to participate wherever we find ourselves. We all have the right to participate freely in any political matter. Right to acquire and own immovable property anywhere in Nigeria. Yes, that's also very self-explanatory. Okay, so quickly rounding up, this is the last slide, I believe. We have the INEC regulations and guidelines for the conduct of election in Nigeria. And under the INEC regulation, we have the fact that you have the right to register and vote. So every qualified citizen in Nigeria has the right to register. You know, no one should tell you that, you know, you cannot register to vote. It is a right guaranteed by the Constitution, and it cannot be denied to any potential qualified citizen. I really loved how there was so much ruckus that was raised. Even on social media, a lot of people complained when they were harassed, and I could see that some of them, no matter how long that it took them, they stayed on it until they got a resolve, because they knew that, you know what, it is my right and I'm going to follow this through till the end. So also note that these rights as well may be limited, because sometimes the commission might give a timeline to register. So that means that after that timeline, you have to be careful so that you're able to get registered before the time for the election. It doesn't continue even up until the date. So once there's a published timeline, be sure that at least you're able to get registered. You have the right to vote and be voted for when you have registered. So every person, as long as you have satisfied the requirements laid down by law, you are fully eligible to vote and be voted for, right? However, of course, we do know that you have to carry your valid voter's card, right? And your name must be correct, and every identification must also be correctly provided for in that voter's card. Again, it's also limited because there's a time to vote. You cannot be sleeping in your house when they said vote between 10 a.m. and 12. Then you will come out by 5 p.m. and say, I have the right to vote. They carry the ballot boxes, but then they announced it, or in your area, they had said that this is the time. So each of these things, they still come with their mini regulations as well. So as much as possible, we also have an obligation, you know, to be there at the right time, right? We also have the right to recall an elected representative. This is one aspect that we're not really conversant with in Nigeria, you know, because sometimes we believe that once we voted someone, that's the end. We can actually come together, and through a referendum, we can plan and recall an elected representative. I think it has been done before. I'm not very sure, but I think I've heard about it being done before. So it's something that we can definitely look into whenever we have issues with our elected representative. We have a right to secrecy, privacy when voting. I heard that in some parts of Lagos, people were being threatened to say who they voted for and things like that. Your voting choice is your private responsibility. It is for you and you alone. No one has the right to know. If you want to tell, you can tell, but you do not need to divulge that information. A right to attend rallies and campaigns. Yes, you have a right to participate and campaign and build up momentum, you know, give information, spread your flyers and all of that. You have that right. Also, you have the right to information about election. Yes, definitely. Details about election should not be hidden. INEC has the responsibility to publish it on public platforms, on the dates, the time, procedure, and also the people who are also running for each of these elections. These are public information and should be properly communicated. Okay, and finally, just as was said earlier, in conclusion, the Nigerian Constitution outlines properly, and I'll say in a very decent manner, it outlines the provisions of fundamental human rights. The problem It's not that the leaders do not know about the law. It is a problem of implementation, right? It is a problem of implementation because we just have these laws beautifully stated, right? All of the A, B, and C's, they're all there. But for any development to take place, government should find a way to marry democracy, rule of law, and human rights. It is also our duty, when we talk about government, you are part of the government as well. We also have to call the government to book, right? Put them at their tools. Let them know that, you know what, we want to be rightly governed. It's everyone's responsibility. We can start talking about the problems from now to tomorrow, but at some point, we have to do the work. It may take long, it may take years, but at least the little step in the right direction will lead us to a better life. All right. Thank you very much, Silas. That brings me to the end of my facilitation. Thank you. Hello?
Okay, thank you so much, Uchechi. Silas, are you there?
Sorry, I'm back. Thank you so much, Uchechi. Such an informative and impactful class. It's time for questions and answers. I can see Atiba Adediran has had his hand up for a while. I think he has a follow-up question. I'll ask you to unmute, then you ask your question. Or please just make it as brief as possible, straight to the point, Atiba Adediran. I have asked you to unmute. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Kudos to the facilitator. I appreciate. My question is this: in a situation whereby one's right is being infringed on, is there a way one can bring that out? Like instead of going to the court of law to file a fundamental, is there any other way that it can be recalled? Two, in a situation whereby freedom of expression and thought, whereby one narrates how events happens, maybe between 2 or 3 persons in which they trampled on the person's right and it got reported on media. But those are the ends who perpetrate such later comes and start threatening such person with libel suit and defamation of character. Is there a way one can balance the stuff? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the second question, please?
The second question is under the freedom of expression and thought, there is a case like maybe abuse of power between police, a lawyer, and let's say my person. They want to grab a land, and I stood against that. No, you cannot resell these report, this also, this and these others. Later, I got invited from the station. I appear in person. From there, led to detention. So I narrate my audio, my encounter at the station on media. The following day, the lawyer connived with the police and start saying, I am a liar, that I will be charged for libel and defamation of character, that it is a criminal offense, this and this, all sorts of things. But later I requested that I write the letter to that effect, okay, it should point out to where I've defamed the lawyer so we can continue our matter. But till today, they've never shown any side of the story that I narrated that I defamed or I libel the lawyer. And my question was not that. Now, if someone finds his or herself in this situation, is there a way such person can beat around it without getting to court of law to seek redress?
Okay. To your first question about if there are ways that you can seek redress for your human rights, obviously we have the courts, the High Court, the State Court, but we also have the commissions as well. where you can report some of these issues. Public Complaints Commission. I think in Lagos, we have, it's actually quite viable. Some of these commissions, they actually do good work. Oh, no. You can make your complaints as well. It's enforced by the court, but you can make your complaints at the commission. There's a National Human Rights Commission. You have the Public Complaints Commission. You also have the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, right? So some of these places, you can actually write to them. It's very serious, and you have your facts with you. You can write to them as well. But I always advise, when it comes to like very critical matters, it's good to engage the services of a lawyer who not only is able to interpret the law, but is able to guide you and say, okay, this one is court-worthy, or this one you can easily, maybe with a letter or a cease and desist or something, or you can settle out of court because of the magnitude of the case. To the second thing that you mentioned about libel. Now, the thing is, you can't stop someone from, if someone feels that their right has been threatened, you can't really stop them from going to court if that's what they want to do, right? But libel and defamation are very specific wrongs that you have to prove them. There are very specific things that you need to prove, right? If you're claiming libel or defamation, and if you're not able to prove those things, your case will probably not succeed. I mean, anyone can go to court. The court is open for anyone to go to, but can you prove your case is the issue, right? So if that's what they want to do, then that's fine. But you can do well to also educate yourself and say, okay, let me actually even see what it would take them to win this case. And they will have to prove this. And if in fact it happened to you and you were an active person in whatever, you said it was a land case, then so be it. But again, defending yourself by yourself in a court is quite risky. So having a lawyer would be your best bet, right? Again, you can't stop anyone from going to court if that's what they want to do. But as much as possible, you have to be well defended. You have to make sure that you arm yourself with good defense. But again, I'll say libel and defamation are very specific wrongs that are very hard to proof. There are very specific things you need to prove. So whether they bring police and whatever, it doesn't mean that they'll win the case, because it's very clear that certain things need to be proved. And like I said, that's why you probably need to engage the service of a lawyer in that matter. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I can see no hands yet, but I saw someone put a question earlier on. Can you hear me, Uchechi?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, earlier on, someone put a question that if no one is above the law, why do we have immunity for presidents and governors? And that has also been a question for me, because I believe a crime is a crime. Why do we let somebody go away with it just because you're occupying a very high office in governance? Thank you.
I mean, listen, there's so many things. There's so many things in the Constitution that are very questionable. I don't know what the intent behind that rule or that law was, but I would think that perhaps the person who drafted it had in mind that whoever was going to occupy these positions would be people of principle, and it was sort of like maybe a parting gift that you've done us so well, so we're not going to embarrass you, and we're not going to drag your name through the mud. So this would be, but obviously we can see that that provision is quite redundant, because time and time again, it has not aged well. So I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I agree with you that that's also quite a very arbitrary provision, but I still believe that there are ways around it as well. There are ways around it. It's not coming to mind now, but yeah.
Okay, I've asked Gabriel to unmute and ask his question. Gabriel, you can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, good evening. Thank you so much to our teacher. I just want to add to what our teacher has just said on the question of immunity. The immunity that is granted to governors and presidents does not make them above the law. It only suspends litigation against them while they were in office. The intention is to prevent any arbitrary or all kinds of litigation against them that may be a distraction to their, role as the governor or the presidency. That doesn't stop the fact that after their tenure, they can be prosecuted. So in other words, the immunity granted to them is within the period of their, their term. After that period, they can be prosecuted for whatsoever that they have done wrong. So it's not as if they are above the law. They only suspend such, claim against them during the pendency of their tenure. So it's not as if they are above the law. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Gabriel, for that bit. I think that's also something we need to, I think after they've left, after some years as well, they still have some kind of immunity, but I'm going to look into it as well. Thank you, Gabriel.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. I think we have another question in the chat box. I don't know if you can say it, or should I read it out for you?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Silent.
In a situation you engage a lawyer and they discover that one's case is genuine against police and lawyer who engage in conspiracy, but failed to challenge the process of conspiracy while protecting a fellow colleague. So I guess that's saying if your lawyer refuses to challenge another lawyer that conspired against you, what do you do?
Okay, so now for me to change the lawyer then. I would say this, Atiba, right? You don't necessarily have, thank you, Gabriel. I mean, you probably need to get another lawyer. You don't necessarily have to get a lawyer, right? You can defend yourself, but it's very, very, very risky because the law can be hard to interpret as a layman. And it's important to arm yourself with all your defense mechanisms. I mean, if your lawyer is being dodgy, probably you need to relieve them of their duty and get another lawyer, right? Yeah, I think that's the best I would advice I would provide.
Okay, thank you very much. There's another question in the chat. I don't really understand it. It says, is right to secession a corollary or right of assembly? I ask this on the back heel of the notion that Nigeria's unity is non-negotiable, as President Jonathan charged 2014 confirmed. I don't know if you understand that question.
No,
because I don't.
I'm so sorry. I do not understand. It's right to cessation,
Yes.
a corollary,
Cessation.
the right of assembly. What does that mean, though? All right. Can the person unmute and expatiate more on that question, please? That's Ekpa.
Yes, can you raise your hands? Let me unmute you. Well, I guess he's not here. Okay, Gabriel is adding to what Gideon is adding to what Gabriel said. More so to what Gabriel said. I have a question. Should there be left all this while to continue? Should they be left all this while to continue to damage the system, people, and the law? Where then is the vote of no confidence? There's the citizens' right to checkmate what their leaders are doing.
I mean, Gideon, there are checks and balances in government, right? If as a sitting president, your powers are not universal, your powers are not supreme, right? There's still checks and balances. The legislative checks what the executive is doing. The judiciary checks what the executive is doing. That's why you have the rule of law, and each body or each arm of government is checking each other. And don't also forget that the legislative can also impeach so there are still things that can be done to checkmate and to, check. And I agree with Gabriel, because imagine if a sitting president has to leave all he's doing, we're going to be answering, court case and all of that. It would be very, very distracting to an entire nation. If it is so bad, then the legislators should do what they're called to do, take the action that they're called to do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to add that, I think over the years, we citizens have ceded our rights to only the people in office, as opposed to reaching out to our representatives to push laws or legislations or push for impeachment. If it affects our constituency, we sit down and wait for them to take the initiative. I guess that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I don't see any more questions. I don't see any more questions at this point. Since there are no more questions, I would hand over to our DED, my able Oga, Madam Lisa, for the rest of the class.
Lisa.
My madam at the top, ma. Okay, it seems she's not here. Charlie, do you want to round up the class for us?
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. Thank you very much, Silas. That was a very insightful class. I also had to sit very well and listen, at least with the way things are going. We need to go back to the drawing board when it comes to our rights and then the Constitution. Thank you very much, Ma. That was very insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silas, for the great moderation this weekend. And thank you, everyone, for turning out into class today. Though they thought the attendance looks so very poor, but well done, everyone. So we can all unmute and tell our facilitator, thank you for the class today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Job well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Quite insightful.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure having me.
Thank you. I wish I have time to continue to engage you.
Thank you very much for the class.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you, Ma.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. And good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. I was muted.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was such a pleasure to be in the class today. And I also like to encourage every one of you. This is a big step you're taking. So I encourage you to continue. This knowledge is not going to be wasted. There's definitely going to be use for it. And together we can do amazing things. I know that the nation seems to be in a state of despair, but I trust that we as the coming, leaders, the upcoming generation, there's so much more that we can do. And with good knowledge, with wisdom and arming ourselves with all of this information, we'll make a difference. Let's stay positive. Thanks. And to the team, Maureen, Lisa, Silas, every one of you, thank you so much. This was a really good class. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Ma.
Hope to see you later at some other time.
All right, see you all next weekend again, and enjoy and have a blessed week. Bye.